Hello, everybody, wherever you might be in the world. Good afternoon from Europe. My name, as you may know by now, is John Quigg. I'm a fellow aortic dissection survivor. I've clocked up 18 years, so I'm 18 years old in my second life. And one of the reasons I've been invited to do this show is because following that event in my life, I started to reevaluate things I wanted to do, change my lifestyle, realized I had to make some changes. And I started studying psychology courses, doing courses, and gradually gained qualifications to work in the field, doing volunteering, and so on and so forth. And so, one of the things I would like to be able to do in my presence here is to be able to give something back to the community from somebody who is both kind of like I try to say, sort of in the trenches with the condition every week, every day, with medication, with issues, with reviews, with scans, with anticoagulation, with ups and downs, but also bringing some psychological experience to it, some counseling, occasionally, well, more than occasionally, I hope, being practical, without at the same time being a physician. I'm not a cardiologist, so I'm not here to give hard medical advice or advise people about what you should do about your medications or your condition. But I am here to kind of hopefully advise about ways of coping with some of the things that we experience from living with this condition. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have a guest on the show, but before I come to that, what I did a little bit last week, and I'm just going to take a moment with everybody doing that, is just to remind ourselves of the importance occasionally. I call it getting the camera out from the close up of our lives and just taking a moment to breathe, to become conscious of our breathing, to be conscious of whatever we're doing, whether we're sitting, whether we're lying, whether we're walking, and just gently scan our bodies, notice where we might be having some pains and some aches, just kind of listen to them. And this is about kind of coming back into ourselves, because so much, and especially there can be a tendency to do this with this condition, we can be in our heads, living with the anxiety all up here, and not actually doing the basic things and reminding ourselves that things like our lungs are working every second completely automatically. Maybe it's also healthy to kind of give them a big thank you. So just spending a moment, even as I'm talking, if we need to close our eyes, we can, just doing that. So I'm not going to do that now for more than 10 seconds, but I am going to just stop for a moment and just kind of listen to myself. Okay, and the first thing I kind of noticed about that is we're losing silence in this world. I was reading about this the other day, that with phones, with screens, with music, with podcasts, there's hardly any silence anymore. We don't get up in the morning and just kind of wander about. We maybe grab our phones or listen to the news or switch the television on. There's the sound of cars. There's the sound of construction. Recently, I went walking on a old medieval Roman route that didn't go through any cities and went through the country. And the thing that really struck me about the place was just how quiet it was. And I thought how 2,000 years ago, how much quieter the world must have been than it is today. So there's something to reflect on. But anyway, to cut to the chase, as I said, we're delighted to have a guest with us today. And that guest is no less than Karen Anderson, who Karen needs no introduction, really, the founder of Aortic Hope, for which reason none of us would be actually here if it wasn't. I mean, actually doing this show or having this wonderful service, unless it was for Karen. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome her as a guest. on this show. Hi there, Karen.
Hi. Hi, I'm
Lovely
in
to
the
have
hot
you with
seat.
us.
This is so interesting. I'm never usually on this side of the table. So, yeah, in the hot seat.
Yes,
I'm excited. I'm excited to do this.
great. Okay. So I'm going to, fire a few gentle warm-up
Okay.
questions at you, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the things that strikes me about you is you are very good at doing this. You're a very good presenter. You have that, you seem to me to have that kind of performer in you. Is that something that's you've always had? Have you always enjoyed doing those kind of things? I
I,
noticed you mentioned in your notes to me that beforehand that you used to do some ballroom dancing as well.
yeah. Yeah, I have a very bizarre personality. I don't mind doing this, but if you put me in a room with a microphone in front of people, I wanna run away. I need a really big podium, and I probably need to find a way to block my ears from hearing my own voice because that throws me all the time. But performing, no. I was, like back in school, I always wanted to be a rockette or dance like backup for, Paula Abdul or some, MTV people, but that never really happened. But I was in school plays. I did choreograph Romeo and Juliet, and I was a
Hmm.
jet in West Side Story.
Oh,
But
wow.
I'm not going to sing and I don't want to act, although I talk to myself in many different accents when I'm alone all day. But yeah, I used to do ballroom dancing. I was at a nightclub once when I was 25, and I saw this gentleman. He was little bit older than me doing the hustle, right? Or it was East Coast swing. And I was like, I have got to learn how to do that. And of course, he happily obliged and spun me around the dance floor, and I would just naturally followed. I didn't even know that I knew how to do any of it, but I did. And then I just a few months later competed in it and came in first. And I did my first
Great.
United States Amateur Ballroom Dance Association, my one and only competition. It cost a lot of money and a lot of money to get a ribbon, but I felt really good about it. And I came in um, second on, I think it was cha cha and rumba, and third on waltz and tango, which I'd only learned the tango the night before by watching Fred Astaire TV, like VHS tape. So yeah,
Fabulous. So
that's what I
you've
used to
got a
do.
natural facility for movement, do you think?
Yeah, I do for dance for sure. Yeah,
And you must have been very fit doing all of that.
all the
No?
yeah. Oh yeah,
Because
this is
dancers are
yeah.
incredibly fit, aren't they?
Oh, 100%. And I actually was a cheerleader in college, not because of my cheery abilities, because I hated all of that rah rah rah. But I
Hmm.
went front and center. I was in the back for cheer because I could never remember, but I was in the front for the dance portions. So yeah, that was fun. Those are fun days. I had a lot of fun back then. Yeah.
And do you still like to dance and things like that?
I do, but it's funny, you would think it would be like riding a bike, but if you don't do it, you learn, you can lose that balance a little bit. And I
Hmm.
remember after my dissection, I didn't know I was having a frozen arm, frozen shoulder. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to be able to dance with my husband. Like I can't get my arm up. Like how do you not dance anymore? And I worked really
Hmm.
hard to make sure I could build up stamina. Today, if you said, could I hustle for a 3-minute song? Probably not. I probably would tire out. But, I try the TikTok dances every now and then, which to me are not dances. That's the
Hmm.
strangest thing I've ever seen.
So,
People
so
stand in
when
place and
something
do
comes
these
on
moves.
TikTok, you'll quickly learn it and copy it, will you?
I will check them out, save multiple versions, find the easiest version, do it 7 or 8 times, put on a pair of sunglasses, and then I'll hit record. Because with the sunglasses, I feel like it's not as exposed. It's so silly,
Right.
right? But then I
Yeah.
will do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Great.
don't know.
And I mean, I obviously don't know you that well, but you come across as a very upbeat, kind of jolly person. And
Um,
I
yeah.
wondered if that was kind of, is that a sort of more of a public persona? Or is there more to that? Is that Karen putting on a brave face sometimes?
You have to ask my husband. No, my son would probably say, for the most part, I am. I think I wear many faces. My husband's often said there's 8 faces to every person, um,
Hmm.
and
Interesting.
I feel like the public sees about 6 of my 8, probably. I'm very much the kind of person that it takes a lot to get me upset and angry, and even when I am, I tend to laugh through it. If I'm really upset, I might cry, but it's just because I want to. When I'm so angry that it just comes out. Um,
Mm.
it takes a lot to make me angry. I usually get more disappointed or frustrated. I don't like confrontation, but generally speaking, whatever anybody sees from me online, that's me. If I'm having a really bad day, I'll pull it together to give. If all I have is 10%, I give 100% of myself to the 10. So I don't really feel like many people can notice if there's that big of a shift. Sometimes I'm definitely more up than others, but I usually don't show anybody when I'm really down. But I've recorded myself in the hospital many times, pre-surgical intervention for something, and I still have on like a man's face filter. You know what I mean? I still do it with
Hmm.
humor, so I
Yes.
try.
So you, what you're kind of saying there is, if you're having a bad day, you will battle your way through it, will you?
Mm, yes, but every now and then I do like to have a nice pity party. I just don't make it a slumber party. So I
Okay.
will, because and part of that, I think part of that is as you get older, even though this community would understand if I was having a bad day, I don't, there's something I'm not getting from people, whether it's in my personal life or in this world, that ever seems to fill or fix what I'm going through. I sometimes just want to talk, but I'm looking for something. And so even if I get, well, I totally understand, I understand. I felt like that before, or I know that must be bad. I still am left feeling empty. Like, well, that didn't make me feel good sharing, but I don't know what it is I want somebody to say. And I
Yeah.
think I've gotten to the point where I realize sometimes I just need to say it. There is nothing anybody is going to say. There
Mm.
isn't, and there shouldn't be. I need to do that. I need
So,
to figure that out
other
for me.
words, one of the things perhaps we have to come to terms with the tough lesson in life, that no one's going to save us, are they?
No, no, not emotionally. Not emotionally. That's all on
Mm. And we
ourselves.
have to do the work
Yeah,
on that ourselves. Yeah.
because it's our perception that got us to this icky place to begin with, right? Nobody
Hmm.
really, I mean, okay, so there's, and I'm curious to know your opinion on this as we go off into a tangent. I've heard people say nobody can really hurt you, right? You allow yourself to be hurt. If somebody
Mm.
says something to you and you feel hurt by it, that's you feeling hurt by it.
Yes.
But also there are people that can be real jerks and be really mean and know your breaking points and be verbally tasering you. And then I think the onus is on them. But again, conversation's two-way street. I own the way
Yeah.
I hear it and I own what I say. So my job, I think, is to not be purposefully mean or rude or off-putting if I know that what I'm about to say is going to hurt somebody. And I own how I interpret it. So I can't blame somebody for doing it because I could be way off. I own
Mm.
the right to ask questions. So yeah, but it's taken me so long to get to that place of
Did you? Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And isn't that one of the lessons that as we get older, we kind of think to ourselves,
yeah,
"I wish I'd known that," or "Wish I was there
yeah,
10 years ago," or with the,
right.
the energy I had then, or 20 years ago.
Yeah,
But again, we
right.
have to be kind of humble with that, don't we?
Sure.
Interesting what you say about, and you wanted my opinion about, we bring our own perception to criticisms, don't we?
Yeah, we
So
do.
it's often that the criticism triggers some insecurity in us.
Yeah.
But one of the things, techniques I'll kind of work with sometimes and try and help people with, is and I love that phrase, by the way, verbal tasering, um, is when people do something like that, is to say to myself, and if necessary, to say to them, so what's that giving you being like that? Or
Oh,
what
that's a good
is
one.
what does saying that give you?
Mm-hmm.
When then someone, and someone delivers like a cruel line, you just can say very gently,
Mm-hmm.
what does that give you to say that to me? And
Right.
it and it completely puts them on the spot because it requires them to be authentic.
Or
You know,
you
you put.
do, I'm sure you've heard of imago therapy.
Hmm.
Right. So with a prior marriage, I've had a couple of those. I did do some imago therapy. So I love saying to somebody, wait, let me make sure I understand you. What you just said was, and I repeat it back. And
Yeah.
that usually allows somebody to be like, well, because once they hear what they said, they may not have meant it to be obviously the way I've interpreted it, and or it gives them a chance to rephrase it and say it maybe kinder or not as harsh, right? But
Yes.
you'd be amazed, and you know this, people would be amazed if you simply say, let me make sure I understand you. What you just said was this. The person who just said it would be like, that's not what I just said, but it is what you just said. Maybe that's not
Yeah.
what you meant, and
Yes.
that engages a different dialogue, right?
Well, also, doesn't experience teach us that often when people are, when there is conflict or we're talking to people, people are often saying actually the opposite of what they mean,
Yes.
really,
Yes. Yeah.
or they're
Yeah.
bouncing their own issue onto you.
Right. Oh, that deflection all the time. All the
Yes,
time.
couples.
There's a running joke, believe it or not, many people won't know this, but certain people will. There is a running joke that when people start to become friendly with me, I always say, well, I don't want to get too close because they're gonna bail out. Because there's been, I don't know if it's just that, we get older and people say things and something that someone might say or do really is found to be off-putting by someone else, but instead of bringing it to someone's attention and saying, hey, when you did this, I felt this, they just go bananas on you, and you're like, whoa, well, I don't even know that there was a problem. You've just judged and juried me in the whole 9 yards, and I don't even know what you're talking about. And then when you add
Mm,
on to it our memory issues or our perception issues, our cognitive abilities that are different now for many, it's interesting how people don't give the same grace when you have the same condition. So without going into too much detail of the past,
okay.
but I've gotten into this place where when if I'm called out, I really think hard about it, and I have actually said to people before, I'm sorry that you feel a certain way, but I feel really committed to what I said to you, and if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't change anything. And that's a bold statement, but I've learned to live my life like that. Yeah.
So a couple of things that, many things, of course, are spilling out from what you're saying, as they always do, with anyone really, I find.
Yeah.
But you talked about sometimes feeling not understood, and to sort of to bring that back into this kind of condition that we all live with.
Mm,
Do you feel that that's one of the issues sometimes, that because maybe we can look okay on the outside, and we kind of try and perhaps put on a brave face, and are always working to get back to normal life, that sometimes people don't understand actually that what
mm-mm.
what we're going through?
Yeah, and we've talked about this, I think, before. It's a matter of how reactive are you versus thinking for a moment. Maybe this person is being the way they are because there's something going on in their life I don't know about, which again is not my problem, but I can't. What it comes down to is I can't control what somebody else says or their behavior. My job is solely to control how I react to it. And it has been 55, almost 56 years of me trying to work on how I react,
Hmm.
or at least how the length of time before I react, right? I don't want to react right away. So I like to marinate on some things sometimes, or I'm the one who like to type out a text, get it all out on email, and then you end up.
You found that useful to get it down?
Yes, just get it out. It's not
Mm.
useful to hit send. You never want to hit
Yeah,
send.
well, I'm a great believer in putting something in a draft email and then waiting
Yeah,
24 hours or whatever.
right. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many times I get upset about something and I just look for um, memes, quotes, and I'll type in this huge sentence, and then something will come up and I'll save them because I'm like, oh, I'm going to use it one day. And then you realize that was just the moment, and that's how I get out my feeling in response. But I do think for people who have had a dissection, especially, or really, maybe it applies to anybody who's been faced with their mortality because they find out they have an aneurysm and
Mm.
they read how potentially life threatening it could or could not be. It changes us. And we really do have to give grace, especially if you know someone else has a medical condition. You really don't want to poke the bear or hurt them or cause undue stress and added issue, because that's just going to add insult to injury, right? It's just going to create a worse situation. So you
Hmm.
try to have a little bit more grace, but grace without being, I'm not going to come up with the word, when you treat somebody like they're less able. You don't want to do that. There's a word and I can't think of it. So you just want to um, not be humiliating, not do any of that. Just take a moment yourself as the deliverer and take a moment as the receiver. That we both could
Okay.
do that. Yeah.
So when you talk about kind of learning these things, and we like wish we'd known that before, and it's
Mm.
taken me, I'm 55 years or whatever, again, to sort of marry it up with illness and things. Do you think that your illness has played a part in kind of maturing you in these kind of things and making you more stoic? And
Sure,
Good.
because see, I went to school for communication, not mass comm like journalism and television, but interpersonal relationship communication. That was my major, and I did exceptionally well in it because I wanted something. I didn't want to do anything that had math, and I didn't like. There's so many areas I know I didn't want to do, but I knew that I liked talking. So the guy was like, "Well, why don't you go into speech comm?" But the takeaway from that was learning how to change the way you communicate depending on your audience. So life isn't about the golden rule. When you treat others the way you want to be treated, it's the platinum rule. It's treat them how they need to be treated. You have to switch that. So I could talk to somebody that's much more empathetic, and where I'm going to change my tone to that, or someone who's a chatty Cathy, I'm going to be much more chatty, or someone who's a director and they just want, give me the info and get out. I can do that. I can just come in, say what I need, and
And you
roll
don't
out.
feel that you're losing kind of who you are in doing that?
No, because I become who I need to be for that person. And there's so if you had to tell somebody you have an appointment scheduled at this time, you can either just tell them and that's it, or you could tell them and then talk about it. Oh, well, the weather's going to rain that day. It is. I know. But if you have any you see what I mean? You can change and you're not losing yourself in that.
Interesting.
But I feel like when I felt like prior to the dissection, I've always worked my whole life. I always had a job. Um, I would have 16 screens minimized, manage, a building full of staff. And then you work to get money for benefits, food, all of that, but for vacation, you go home, do what you need to do, go to bed, you got to do the same thing. It's hamster in a wheel.
Hmm.
And then when you realize you can't work anymore, or you have a situation like this and you have all this time in your hands to sit outside and stare at a cloud because there's nothing else you can do because you're recovering, you realize a lot about clouds. I mean, it sounds silly, but putting my feet and walking in the grass without any shoes on, I was like, this is what it feels like, because you don't realize these things when you're on the hamster wheel. And once
Hmm.
that happened, everything just slowed down. And I was so scared of reverting back to who I was, which was one of the scariest things when I saw this organization starting to take off and grow. I wanted to always make sure that I would stay grounded in who I became. One, because if I could work, I'd have a job and I'd be making lots of money. Two, because my body will shut me down anyway. And so I need to really honor that. And three, because I like clouds, metaphor. I like enjoying and noticing life. Because one day I
Right.
woke up and I was like, how did I get to be almost 56? I was just 45. What just happened? I was just
Mm.
25. My body disagrees with
Sure.
me, but
Could it be then that would be one of the positive things that has come out of this
so
dissection and
positive.
illness?
It's the most positive thing. It's a
Right.
deeper
So just to
appreciation.
summarize that, you expressed that really nicely. That you suddenly reminded yourself of what it's like to walk through the barefoot through the grass. Whereas
Yeah,
when we well, it's back to that thing of taking everything for granted, isn't it? Like I
yep, we
said at
do.
the top of the show, let's spend a moment just kind of reminding ourselves of
Hmm.
silence or who we are, and
Right.
and we and I'm sure you probably have the same phrase in America, but there is generally an attitude in Spain that people, um, people work to live in
Hmm.
Spain, whereas
Yeah.
perhaps more in Northern Europe, people live to work.
Hmm.
Yes, and
Right.
and the interesting kind of shift in attitude. So,
Yeah.
would you say that you sort of moved along that spectrum more?
100%. 100%. Because there isn't anything, everything I do is because I choose to do it now. And when things go awry, um, if something has to be canceled, if someone gets sick, this is all volunteer. And it's within a community that would understand that we had to
Mm,
postpone or cancel, or that
yeah.
we had a spelling error. This doesn't have to be what anybody's version of perfect is, other than what we think it is in the minute. And at the end of the
Hmm.
day, the way to grade ourselves is if one person feels better, feels more hopeful, or understands their condition, then I'm perfect at what I did, right? It's not about spelling. And if this guy, that would be ideal, but it would be nice to not have the word aortic come up as approximately, which always happens when I type it. But people understand. And that's not the end goal isn't to be perfect in that meaningless stuff. It's
Yeah.
how are you able to make somebody feel, which is gets right back to who I think I am, which is more of a
So
humanist
that
than
goes to
anything
the,
else.
in a way, the heart of the philosophy of this organization. That if you
Yeah.
can if you can, or if we can help one person to feel better,
Yeah.
even say by listening to this show, finding
Hmm.
some nugget that is kind of worthwhile.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And that's something that, we love having volunteers. We'll always accept anybody who says they want to do something, because at the end of the day, clicking share on this program, right? Clicking share or clicking like could do what we needed it to do to push it over the edge so more people find out about this. That's a huge contribution. That's if that's all I need from somebody to do all day, I'm thrilled, right? That's huge. You just
yes,
allowed somebody else to find out about us and listen to this and maybe feel validated, by the end of the show on some emotions. It's a trickle down effect. And that has
sure,
nothing to do with how much money you raise or if the sentence structure was perfect. Just has to do with
mm,
being humans and relating to each other.
yeah.
I
I've just
never thought
realised
this. I
I'm
never
on low
thought this
battery.
way.
I'm on low battery, so I'm just going to
Oh yeah,
quickly
no.
plug in.
I was just gonna
So
say
they
I never thought
say,
about any of this before, ever. This is all post dissection mindset.
yeah. So there's a little phrase that I use sometimes, which I think is a really good one in terms of life philosophy, and it applies a lot when people are very perfectionist. And it's a practical line, which is, don't let perfection be the enemy of done. Okay,
Say that again.
don't let perfection be
Oh,
the enemy of done.
yes.
And I actually have transferred that onto how I kind of manage this condition,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, John, don't let, I'm not feeling quite as good today. I'm not feeling as perfect as I was, or I'm not feeling as perfect as I was yesterday, as getting through the end of the day, as in done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Right.
that's a day done, and I've
Right.
made it, and just breaking it down into those manageable
Yeah.
chunks.
Yeah.
So if I'm having a bad day, I get to the end of that day, done.
Right. And we've also taken that a step forward and said days don't have to be just good or bad. It could just be, instead of telling somebody have a great day, you just have a day, whatever your day is going to be.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
You just have a day. But
Yes.
that's not to say all of this jovialness. I can't tell you how many days, how many days I'm just like, oh crap. I can't even have the window of feeling good never stays open long enough. It just never does. It always slams shut. And it could be something really simple, but it takes now some kind of health issue just boils it back up again, which tells me I might be due for another tune-up of EMDR. I might need another tune-up therapy session. Instead of talking about my life, it might be time to go back to revisiting health-related traumas just to gain my perspective back on not making mountains out of something that's small, because I want to reserve my energy for when there's actually an emergency. That's what I'm told by my
Okay.
husband all the time. So
So,
yeah.
well, we'll come to that in a moment. But let's just slip right out of my head what I was going to say. Um, oh, I know what I was going to say. You mentioned earlier about, in kind of when you're steamed up in sort of conflict, that you want to get it down, and then we were talking about maybe sticking in a
Yeah.
draft email, and then you come back to it, and sort of that moment's passed, and it feels different. Isn't
Right.
one of the lessons that we can take from that, and again, in terms of the practicality of managing this condition, is that there is never a constant anything. It's
Yeah.
always going to be in a state of flux.
Yeah.
And that can be what related also into just what you've been saying about maybe getting too worked up. And it's again getting that camera out and not
Hmm.
being too owned by the issue in the moment, by going,
Hmm.
whoa, John, this, what's happening here?
Right.
Just let this pass through, you know, dollars to donuts, in 12 hours time, you'll be feeling a bit different about
Hmm.
this because
Yeah.
something else will have come along.
Right. Right. Well, and I think there's a lot of times, and I don't know if it's for me, it's a lot less since the dissection, and I think it's because again, I'm very well aware of how fast time is escaping me. You don't think about these things when you're in your 20s or
Hmm.
your 30s because you're raising kids maybe, or you're busy with your career or whatever. But why do we always automatically assume that something that we don't like that we've experienced has to do with us? I very much now live very comfortably in the world of this has nothing to do with me. This
Hmm.
temper tantrum that this person's displaying in front has nothing to do with me. Because if
And you
it
can't do
did,
anything about it anyway.
no, because if it did have something to do with me, we should be able to sit down and say, I would like to have a conversation. I'd like to tell you something. I I can take that from anybody, but displays of like wildness. I'm like a fainting goat. I just want to go just take myself out. It's too much energy. And as you know, a lot of this um, negative energy can really impact my other disease element, which is Crohn's. So I've just learned to, I don't need to be in that zip code. I can be here and watch this play out, grab some popcorn when you're done. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, even if I'm not going to like it. But there's ways to talk to people and communicate. And so that's
Yeah.
just changed with me, I think,
And again,
for
is
sure.
that something that illness has taught you?
Oh yeah.
That you almost like have to do? It's part of your kind of paramedic self-care kit.
Oh, I like that paramedic self-care kit. Yeah, because life's too short. I don't have time for it. I don't
Hmm.
I don't have time for it. Just we're all supposed to be here to make each other's lives a little easier, not necessarily harder. But again, I can't fix what I don't know. And I'm always willing to try. I may want to think about it and then say, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to, or say I'm probably going to fail, but I am going to try really hard. Just expect nothing. So if I do it, you'll be really happy. I mean, that I can't
Mm.
be any more honest than that. And that is really how I've been living life since the dissection. And I probably
Yeah.
should have started it a long time before that. Yeah.
So people have maybe been listening to the other programs, other shows of this, find me sort of talking about fear a lot. And I believe actually that fear sits under, almost every single thing, anger, how we
Yeah.
react to things is because it's so instinctive and fear is so caught up with survival. How do I know you have your fears. It's a given, isn't it, with this kind
Yeah.
of condition that you have fear, and that can crop up. You talked to me before about dreams and things like that.
Hmm.
Do you feel like telling us about what kind of things make you afraid?
I just had a therapy session the other night with my therapist, and I was telling her that it can't be normal for people to go to bed, and nighttime's the worst time. I think many of you out there would agree. For us, nighttime is the witching hour. It's the worst. And for a long time, I kept myself active. This is before, TikTok, and I was shopping online and stuff like that. I would always be all over Facebook. And that was even
At
worse
night.
because,
At
yeah, at
night, you
night,
mean?
because now I'm reading things that people are writing and it would scare myself. And so then I got off of that, and nighttime's hard. Yeah, I like to keep
Well, but
myself
tell me why
busy
you think nighttime's hard for us.
because it's supposed to be the quiet time, right? You're done all your busy stuff in the day, and you're supposed to now let your mind get quiet.
And do you find
And
that quite hard?
oh, so hard. So hard. That's why I used to take Xanax a lot. We just talked about that too. And it's because that's when the most stress and anxiety would happen. So I
Hmm.
would stay up for like 2 nights, go to sleep very limited, and then take a Xanax, and then I would be out and have blissful night's sleep. Well, those meds are not good for you for a variety of reasons, but of course that's between you and a doctor. And I just made the conscious decision recently to increase my magnesium because I've been hearing it's really good for sleep. And I talked with my doctor, and she said, "Yeah, you should definitely increase it." And now I'm falling asleep so much nicer.
Mm.
But there's still going to be that time at night when, for me, again, if I don't feel well, I have a slightly torn rotator cuff, or I have issues here or there. It's playing. It plays and kicks back in all of my past health traumas. And then sometimes if I have really bad arrhythmia and it's cardiac related, I just sit there and say, well, I guess please don't laugh. I say, I guess tonight's the night. I'm probably going to die. Let me just at least make sure my hair looks good. So when I'm found, I look pretty in the morning. It's
Oh,
the stupidest,
bless.
but then I fall asleep. But this
Yeah,
just
because
happens
so
multiple
what do you
nights.
think's happened there?
Um,
Because I think I know kind of what's going on. What do you think happens that gets you to fall asleep?
I just succumb to it, and I just am so tired that I try to control. I'm always trying to control everything. I've always been that way. So
Yeah,
when I control my death, I wanted to control the way my parents were going to
as many
die,
of us do. That's a
everything.
huge part of
Yeah,
the fear. Is so
control.
we and taking and paying over attention to our health and panicking about our
Yes.
health is the fear of death,
Yeah,
isn't it? Which we all
100%.
know is coming. Yeah.
Oh yeah, everybody's going to
And
die
I
from
mean, it
this.
sounds to me that what you do is, you're there going no, 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 and then you kind of go, okay, make sure my hair looks good. Here we go, and you
Going to
get
fall
down
asleep.
down the slide you go
Yeah.
into sleep.
Right. And the sleep is great. Now, not to say that immediately after the dissection, I had so many nightmares. Before I was
Yeah, I get
diagnosed
you.
with
Yeah, me
PTS,
too.
it was
Yeah.
all tsunamis, like really tall waves coming over skyscrapers and just horrible drowning dreams, and that probably had to do with the heart lung, machine and stuff. But um, yeah, so these things still happen, and I still struggle
Yeah.
sometimes at night, or I will wake up because I feel dizzy in my sleep, in my dream, and I wake up and I'm dizzy, and then this has happened 3 nights ago, and I woke up and I sat in bed and I thought, does my chest, it's the first thing I do is I scan everything before I panic. I'm like, well, my chest doesn't hurt. That's a good sign. Maybe I got dizzy because I was falling asleep and I really wasn't dizzy. Am I nauseous? What am I feeling? And then I sit up slowly and I just I assess everything. What hurts? What's still here? What feels good? Can I stand? Do I need to wake my husband? No, because then I have to change my pajamas and I go through this whole thing, pros and cons, and then I'm
Mm.
fine. I've distracted whatever was starting to brew panic wise in my head. Now I've distracted
Yeah.
it with other thoughts.
But there are lots of things that are quite complex here, aren't there, about the night
Hmm.
and um, about
Yes.
sleep in itself? Because sleep is a kind of, we go unconscious, we go into a deeper state. It
Right.
is a kind of, on one level, a mini death.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like the French word, for sneezing is like a petit mot, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like that moment when when you sneeze when you're driving or something, and you've gone for that moment, haven't you?
You're like,
Yeah.
I can't see the road.
Yes.
Right.
And so there's that, and yes, it is called the kind of witching hour, isn't it? And
Hmm.
there is a strange energy in of the night, isn't it?
Yeah.
Darkness for one thing.
Right.
I remember after my dissection, because my father had passed away with
Hmm.
a kind of, it was an old age heart related condition, but he passed away the night before in hospital. He was due to have a
Oh.
hip operation,
Hmm.
and I was so convinced after, my incident that, if I fell asleep, the same thing would happen to me.
Hmm.
And totally irrational, of course, but at the same time, not totally irrational, because
Yeah.
what my conscious mind is trying to do there is sort of protect me from that fear. And
Yeah.
so it's like, well, okay, John, let's keep you awake then,
Right.
which of course is not
Sure.
great because
No.
you're going to get exhausted.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
and of course, if you've been through, like many people have in all kinds of different walks of life, when we go to sleep and we start to dream, the
Hmm.
unconscious mind is often doing lots of work to try and resolve that trauma. I
Right.
mean, one thing you can be absolutely sure of is that dreams tell us our truths, tell us the
Hmm.
truths about ourselves.
Yeah.
They will show us our fears. They will show us what's on their mind. And
Right.
it's like, well, it's scrambling around trying to sort all of this stuff. So it's no surprise to me that um, we can have trouble sleeping and then we can wake up, and also that thing. There's a great line in a song by that American band called America. Don't really
Mm-hmm.
remember them. Kind of
Yes.
around at that, when was it, late 70s or something?
Yeah.
Don't think about tomorrow. It's a whole night's sleep away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Now I'm
it's so
singing it.
true in a way, because you aren't going to be able to do anything about the bank until the morning. You know,
Right.
you aren't going to be able to do anything about whatever problem your kid may be having. So
Hmm.
again, it's almost like, you may as well let go. It's like not that dissimilar from talking to people about fear of flying. And the big thing
Yeah.
that actually crops up all the time is what's really happening with fear of flying is it's a loss of control. Because
Hmm.
when you get into that metal tube,
Hmm.
you have to give up control to a so-called expert who you can't see, who's sitting at
Yeah.
the front, and they basically fly you. And if they don't
Right.
manage to take, you give that permission and you don't manage to take off and you don't manage to land, you're in serious doo-doo.
That's right.
So you have to let go, don't you?
Right.
And
But
once
do
you kind of
people
do, it's like, ah,
But people don't really think about it when they get in the car or when they're getting ready to cross an intersection. I got hit by a car for the first time in my life. Thank God the guy was not driving above like a few miles an hour. But I was in an intersection, lights red. He's coming up, to the crosswalk. It turns green, but I hadn't made it on the sidewalk yet. And he just went. And I pumped up on top of his hood and I was like, what the hell? But
oh, he
first
actually,
thing
you
I
weren't
said
in your
was,
car, he hit you in person,
yeah.
yeah?
And then he drove
Oof.
away. Uh-huh. Yep, because his light was green. He didn't want to wait for me to take the two last steps to get up onto the sidewalk. And he just hit me. I was stunned. I couldn't even believe it. But we don't think about it. I think about that now all the time when I cross the street.
Mm,
I'm always looking over my shoulder, but we don't think about it when we're in a car. Maybe people who have been in car accidents, they think about it, but you
yeah.
don't think about it until something happens to you. Um, and I think that even
Well, I
with
mean, I think there is
yeah,
a parallel there maybe with the aortic dissection for us. When we get into our car, our own
hmm
car, we still have control, don't we?
we do, but can't
And when
control
we have
anybody else.
things like an aortic dissection or something like
hmm
that, which maybe comes totally out of the blue, I would say that the biggest wake-up call is, oi, Johnny, you don't have control. You don't have as much
Yeah,
control as you thought you had.
right.
Because things come along and your body, this can happen to your body. Bang.
Yeah, but one of the things my therapist has said to me is I did have control. I had control to say to the physicians, you do what you need to do. Okay, I will listen to I'm choosing to listen to your instruction, which is you can't go to the restroom. You need to use a bedpan. Okay, I have to go. I will do what you're saying. I'm choosing to do that and follow that order. And it's so seamless that we don't realize
Okay,
little
yeah.
things like that. Like I need you to
Mm,
take this medication before you have a CAT scan. Okay, I'm choosing to agree with the fact that you're telling me to take the medication. So even though I would have had no choice, and I rationally understand that, but when I look at it, every time I go in for a scan, I'm choosing to go in for that scan
you
based
are,
upon the
yes.
recommendation.
Yeah.
So
No.
I'm really in control of this up to a point, but a lot more than I realized.
Mm,
And that made me feel a little bit better that I agreed to, okay, you do what you need to do. I'm going to sit here and be the best patient I can be, which is by following your order. So I'm in control of my role, which is to sit here, right? And you
mm.
guys do what you do best. And so it wasn't, I didn't have control over my body, but we don't have control over things. We think we do, but
Yes,
this
that's
whole
my point,
episode's
really.
coming down
Yeah.
to control. This episode should be called Control.
Mm.
Because you're
But
right. That
why?
is,
But people who need, well, broadly speaking, if we
yeah.
say that person always needs to be in control, it's because sitting underneath that is fear. If you don't have fear, you
Yes,
don't need
that's
to
right.
control anything,
That's
do
true.
you?
That's true. No, you're right. And I would never let just somebody control my whole life. No, because they'll do it wrong. They're not going to do
Yeah.
it the way I like it. I might get hurt in
Yes.
the process. See, it all comes back to the same thing. And you're right. It should be called fear. we'll change. We'll change the title. And yet, when we talk about control and we can control ourselves driving in the car, I can't control somebody else driving. And when you have children and they get their license, you can't control the other drivers. You feel like your
Mm.
child's comfortable, but even with health stuff, one of the things I just had a conversation with my son not too long ago, and I said I've been avoiding talking to you for a while, and he's like, why? And I said, because there's certain things you're doing in your life that you could be doing differently that would help you be in control of certain health issues, whether it's exercise, diet. He has a clotting issue, so he should be moving more often. And it's killing me as your parent. Like, I can't do anything. I have no control over this. And I'm just sitting here. And so the only control I have is to disassociate and just not communicate with you right
Hmm.
now, which is horrible and it's breaking my heart. So even in a situation where you don't have control, you have options to remove
Yeah.
yourself from the situation. So
It sounds like you handled that very well with him. And did he respond well to
he
that?
did. He did. He immediately joined the gym the next day. So he's got my voice in his head. He's got it. Yeah. So I
Slam
knew, but
dunk, Mum.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I did good. But I meant it.
Okay.
I really was very panicked about it, and it's been weighing heavily on my mind. But that goes with so many things. You could be arguing, with a spouse or with a friend, and
Mm.
um, they have every right to want to express themselves, but you also still have a right to say, like you said, paramedic, self-care kit, emergency 101. I have every right to say, I'm not going to do this right now. I need to be here, and I will let you know when I'm ready and available to receive more of your information, and we'll talk about it. And you have every right
Mm.
to react however you want to react to
Yeah.
things, you know?
Of course,
Yeah.
that's one of the difficult things about being a patient or being in a hospital is we very easily become a kind of number, don't we?
Hey,
Especially once that kind of hospital overall, I don't
yeah,
really have the same thing goes on, and you see all of these things being printed off about you, and you have a number and a sticker, and then a thing
right.
goes around your wrist. You can very easily feel that your
Cattle.
autonomy is being taken
Yeah, you're like being
taken
cattled.
from you.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why we had created the Ace Your Healthcare Journey campaign by advocating, communicating, and educating, because the last thing we need is, as patients, whether it's a dissection or watch and wait or valve or whatever, is to just be another number,
Do you
because
want to
this
just
is
tell
our
us a little
life.
bit about that?
Yeah,
Remind us
sure.
about that.
Yeah, so I was asked to give a talk in Scotland with Dr. Ben Udelman, cardiothoracic surgeon out of Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, and we had to talk about patient-doctor relationship. But I'm not his patient, so I had to think about what are we gonna talk about? And I realized what made our relationship so successful when it comes to Aorta Cope, and especially Think Aorta, another organization.
Hmm.
Was I had to change my mentality in working with him, because a lot of us, I know there's a shift in younger people don't necessarily feel the way we do. We viewed teachers, we viewed police, we viewed physicians, all at this level. And a lot of it is dress code. Your boss, you wear your tie, your suit,
Sure.
the
And
policeman, the
authority,
doctor,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
White jacket, stethoscope up here.
Mm.
So when they tell you what to do, you say, yes, please, thank you. When you have a side
Mhm.
effect, you don't want to call in, because you don't want to call in too many times. You'll aggravate the front desk receptionist, and she's the gatekeeper, and you don't want to do that. And you don't want to be whiny, complaining, hypochondriac, uh, challenging, disrespectful, so we keep our mouths shut. Almost 81% of between 60 and 81% people here in America withhold information from their physicians for fear of all of those negative words. And
Okay,
that's
that's
not going,
interesting.
yeah, and that's not going to, according to the Journal of American Medical Associations, that's not going to be successful. So I had to learn how to talk to Ben, who's only 1 month older than me, but he's still older. But when I realized that, I was like, yeah, you're like a peer. You don't really know the inner workings of a community. You know your patients, but you don't
Hmm.
know the community at large. And I have a good pulse check on them. So I can give you information that you might not know. And then you, in turn, as a physician, can educate me how I can better pass that information along. And so you had to learn how to talk to each other like friends, like people. He's a guy that plays musical instruments, got a family of 3 kids. Three
Yes.
dogs, 3 kids. He's just a person, gets up every day and tries to save lives and make the world a little better. And I'm like, that's kind of the same thing I'm trying to do, right? So I realized I had to advocate for the community by communicating and educating him. And then I thought, well, let me take this into my own personal life. And in this time I've had this relationship, I fired my primary care, interviewed a new primary care. I've never interviewed a doctor outside of a pediatrician. I didn't know I could interview for myself, but I did. And I had to tell her that I need to know what my expectation should be on turnaround time, and let me decide if that works for me, because if it doesn't, I got to find somebody else. I
Hmm.
almost looked at the relationship with a physician like Match.com, a dating website. You know your profile of who you are and what you need to be the most compliant patient, and you know what you need to live the best quality of life. So now you have to communicate with somebody to determine if you're going to have this lifelong relationship. And it may
Yeah.
be a fit and it might not. And it's okay if it's not. And it's okay to bring materials and say, I pulled this off the internet, explain to me why this is different. They want your participation. They need your participation. And real quick, on the flip side, I was talking about this with my colorectal doctor, and he said, well, the GI arena was the worst offenders of this. They saw such a rise in colon cancer because nobody likes to talk about going to the bathroom. Everybody's
Mm.
embarrassed about a function that every human being
Same with
does.
men and prostate.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And even some women with breast exams, it's mammograms, it's silly.
Mm.
Um, what the physician started doing is, instead of talking to them in an exam room, they would talk to them in their office sitting side by side. They would call them at home where the patient feels comfortable. And they
Mm.
started seeing that patients were becoming much more comfortable discussing their bowel movements, their pain, and
Yeah.
therefore they were catching things earlier by just shifting and having that coat off and sitting next to them like a friend,
Well,
a peer,
well, it's also
right?
ripping back the body shame, isn't it? The
100%.
self-consciousness
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that which can go from for many medical conditions for sure.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so, I mean, I'm aware as well through sort of previous work as well that there's obviously a shift now between patients feeding into the medical profession their own kind of experiences, without broadening this out too much and away from you and some of the questions I
Yeah,
want to sort of finish with.
sure.
Do you think that's one of the things that, as patients, sufferers, survivors, whatever we want to call it, that we can keep pushing to bring into the medical profession? So that, because I don't know whether you have the same phrase in the US, but we have the phrase in the UK, bedside manner, about
Hmm.
doctors, and oh
Yep.
God, he's got a terrible bedside manner.
Yeah.
And they do often have that reputation because they've gone to med school and it's like bang, 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 very scientific, and they often lack people skills. So perhaps that's what we can input from our side.
Yeah. And it's a combination of bedside manner and shared decision making is a big set of buzzwords here. But I think that for everybody it's different. There may be patients out there who a physician's bedside manner of just giving you the facts straight, no fluffing, which goes back to the platinum rule I was talking about. For certain patients, they don't want to know diagrams. They don't want to know all the intricacies. They just want to be
Mm,
told what to do and they'll go do it. And if that makes them the most compliant patient, then they have aced their healthcare journey. So it doesn't have to be all the fluff and stuff that I need to be the best. It just needs to be, again, what they need. And that's advocating for yourself. It's finding your voice. It's telling the physician what you need from them. And, someone's very direct, cold, in my opinion, bedside manner might be amazing for somebody else. And
sure.
that's great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that can also work, with counselling as well. It's very important, if you're
Mm,
helping someone as a counsellor,
yeah.
not to always assume that who you are is going to be beneficial for that person.
Right.
I mean, my
Right.
my personality may not click with somebody, and
Yeah.
doesn't surely life teaches that over the years,
Hmm.
doesn't it? That
Right.
we're just not going to gel with some people, and we are with others.
And that's okay.
Yeah. So we've done a bit on sleep. And we've kind of done a bit. I had a question here then, kind of what scares you? Maybe a bit late in the session to bring this in.
Other than spiders, ugh, um, it's all control. For a while, if you had asked me before my dad died, my number one fear was one of my parents dying. I had practiced their eulogy for years. They didn't even know this. And my therapist would keep telling me, how about just talk to them and tell them what you want to say while they're alive, instead of trying to control what you think's going to happen when one dies.
Mm,
And I did implement that. The last summer I had with my dad, we're very demonstrative family, so I was very open and telling him, like, God, I just had the best childhood. You're such a great dad. And I would call him and I'd say to him, I need to change the handle on my toilet. I already did, but I would ask him, how do you do it? And I would just sit there and let him walk me through it. And I'd say, okay, next step. I did all these things because I wanted him to still feel that I needed him, which I did. And he felt needed. And usually he'd say, did you ask your husband? And I'm like, Dad, just tell me. You tell me what to do. Um, I remember one time my son drove up and said, I need oil, but does it go here? And he pointed to the windshield wiper fluid. And my father was like, no, didn't your mother teach you anything? Let me show you. And my son and I, we had this all planned. Because,
mm.
as you grow, you don't really need your parents as much. You always need them, but not as
Yeah, but
direct
it's
interaction.
healthy for
Yes.
them to grow away
Yeah.
from us. Yeah,
Yep.
for
And
sure.
I talked to my mom multiple times every single day. So this was a different relationship
Wow.
that I was building with
Mm,
my dad. Oh, yeah, my
yeah.
mom, my sister, and I. It's all day affair, all three of us. Always has been that way. So when he died, out of the blue, suddenly just drops in a parking lot after having a biscuit and buying a pair of shoes. Okay. I was not feeling that way. That well. I thought I was going to go to the ER. So I was going to call them to have them come over while I took an ambulance to the ER. But instead, I get this phone call. It was so horrible. We don't have to go into the details of that. When that happened, I am still amazed at how I reacted. It's still stunning to me, and I'm going to go on my fourth year now. I can't believe it that it actually happened. And if you had asked me back then, would I be okay? I never thought I'd be okay. But I feel like grief is a shadow, and sometimes it shows itself more than others, but the shadow is always there. You just, grief becomes part of the way that you live. And
Mm,
I miss him terribly, but I also know that, oh, he knew how much I loved him. He knew I loved him so very much. I don't need to worry about that at all. I have no regrets. And I think if someone's going to die, if for my father, having this happen was probably the least scariest way it could have ever happened if it was
Hmm.
his turn to go. And I understand all of that. But in that moment, nothing, all my plans were completely foiled.
Yes.
you
I remember
know?
actually seeing some of your posts at the time, and it was like I got a very strong sense that you were kind of going, "Nuh-uh, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 this shouldn't be happening. This hasn't
Yeah.
happened. Let's turn it around. Let's wind
Yeah.
the tape back."
Right.
So, but my question was, what scares you? So,
That scares
was it
me. I don't want my
that
mom to
scared you
die.
because it ripped control away from you?
Well, it also scares me because I'm spending a lot of time with my mom. I see her quite often. She lives about 20 minutes up the road still. And I'm always scared. If she doesn't answer the phone, I can feel the panic right now in my chest. Like,
Mm,
I'm going back to the same, what will I do? What will it look like? What do I think I'll feel? What do I think I'll say? What is life going to be like when I can't talk to her every day? And then what happens? Well, now it's just my sister and I go down the road. So what scares me
right.
the most is getting trapped in the hole of what ifs. What ifs are
Yes.
very scary. And that's
So
probably the
to
scariest.
come in there, my observation would be that's back to my point about when those things are happening to us, we're
Yeah.
in the close up of our lives. We're going,
Right. Yeah. Right.
yeah, and and it's about going, whoa, camera out, no, Karen, camera out,
Yeah.
John. All of these things we know they are going to happen. They are the cycle and
Yeah.
circle of life.
Right.
Yes, and we achieve nothing, especially for people like yourself and me, who do have to do this self-care,
Right.
perhaps more carefully than
Yeah.
others, that we don't get too spun and wrapped into that kind of frenzy of it.
100%. Because you can't emote like other people. I couldn't scream. I couldn't get so upset when my dog died because you don't want your heart rate. You don't want to bear down and cry really
Absolutely.
hard, you
Yeah.
know? And that is so in the forefront of my mind that I get so irritated because all I want to do is go to a Wreck-It room and throw plates and break things and punch things. And you got to watch that too. So, um, it is.
Mm.
It's things that are out of my control, but I really try hard. Like you said, when I spiral, I take a minute and I think I want to live in my life. I don't want to live outside of my life trying to control it like a game of marbles. It's not, I can't.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
best
you'll
thing I can
lose.
do is
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
being in my life,
Yeah.
experience it, suck it
Mm.
up. If I'm feeling tense around my mom or my sister or my son, let it pass and just enjoy it because it could be ripped from you. So I want to
Sure.
just like
That's
suck
good
it all in.
self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
couple of more questions then,
Sure.
spinning before we close, spinning right to the other side. So you've given indications that you can kind of get quite worked up and you're very caring, obviously. So
Yeah.
how do you relax?
I love going to the spa. I'm 100% believer. I would go every single month. I want to get facials. I love getting my nails done. I love getting my feet rubbed. I love spa. I love massages. I love smelling a spa. I love listening to
Hmm.
chimes and Enya and music. And I just love it. I love everything about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the theater. So I love musical theater. I will be seeing
Hmm.
Phantom of the Opera for my 15th time this fall. And when it
Oh,
launches in my
15
hometown,
times.
oh, I
Yeah.
love that musical. Yeah, those are the things that
Yeah.
make me so happy. My hobbies outside of living with my family. Yeah, I'm happy, happy time. Yeah.
Okay. And then, well, I mean, you've almost started to go there anyway. So my last question would have been, I don't tend to overuse the word happy because it's quite hard to kind of define and it's so kind of
Yeah.
in, but my question would be, what gives you joy?
Uh, well, there's many different buckets. So I love being with my son. I'm just always happy with him. We make
Hmm.
lots of videos and it's fun and we laugh. And I love when I have date time with my husband. I really, really, I love feeling like I'm a girlfriend and feeling silly and young like that. We always try to do that every week. And I love being by the water. Just as soon as I see it, there's something about it. It's very definitive for me. I just relax instantly. And I honest to God, my favorite time is when I can be with my whole family. I wanted to
Right,
be engaged in front of my family. My husband made it happen. I knew it was the last time I'd be married. And I love family vacations and I love jumping in my mom's bed and we just sit there and we just talk. And I love that.
sweet.
Yeah.
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 So one of the things then we can take from this is that despite these kind of setbacks that you have in life and you've had,
Hmm.
you're telling me, and this is maybe the lesson for all of us, that there still can be great moments of joy.
Oh, 100%. You know, Greg Greenberg, who was one of our board members for a long time, who unfortunately passed in 21,
Mm,
he would always call himself Greg 2.0. And that really took off in the community for a long time. And we are a second version of ourselves, whether it's we've just been diagnosed or we've had surgery. And the 2.0 is different. But why does different
mm.
have to be bad? I'm not disabled. I might be less abled in certain areas, but in other areas, I'm much more. I'm much more than I was before.
Yes.
I have
So
much more knowledge.
again,
Yeah.
another example of how you've
Yeah.
learned
Yeah.
from the setback.
You
Yeah.
have
So
to
that,
be open to what the rest of your life might look like because it
yeah,
might not be what you thought, but
yeah.
it doesn't like something that you can't do doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a negative. Like if I can't
Mm.
take the lawn, if I can't sweep or wash the kitchen floor, am I really hurting for that? No. I'm really
It's
fine
at the
not
end of the
doing it. You know what
world.
I
Yeah.
mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and that isn't that you know, a crucial thing that we can learn is that out of
Yeah.
these huge difficulties that we've all had and these crises,
Yep.
other experiences can come and we can adjust and we go down different pathways
Right.
and different opportunities present themselves in life.
Yeah. Yep.
So that sounds
That's
like a
it.
good place to
I
end.
agree. I agree.
I'd like to thank you very much for coming
You're
on
welcome.
today.
You're
And the
welcome.
other thing is we've stayed very much in the moment, haven't we? Of
We did. We really did. And if people have questions, I'll check out the chat section to see if they had any, and I'll try to get back to people. But you can always, you can always reach me by shooting an email over to Aortic Hope. But yeah, this was good.
okay. So
It
thank you
went
very
by like
much for
that.
joining us. And
Thanks.
I nearly forgot, but everybody, yes, click subscribe, click like, share. And if
Good job.
Joshua's there, I think that's the end of the show. Bye bye,
Great way to
everybody.
end.
Have a
Bye
good the
bye.
rest of your day. Bye bye.